want to talk to you today about what I consider to be the 5 most overrated tools in woodworking. Now, I'm sure that you're not going to agree with everything I'm about to say. That's okay. I'm basing what I'm about to say on 50 years of woodworking. And, as anyone who's done something for a long time, I've got my opinions. So I found tools that I see that are really rated and really spoken about as, man, this is the way to go, that I don't necessarily agree with. So I want to share these with you, not to tell you that you're wrong or that anybody else is wrong, but to give you food for thought. Before you go out and spend that money, maybe you should think about what it is that you're about to buy. So here's my 5 most overrated tools. Okay, number 1 is the Domino Joiner. Number 2 is the miter saw. Number 3 is the pocket hole jig. Number 4 is gimmicky measurement devices. And number 5 is the carpenter's pencil. So let me break this down. Let's take a little time with each one of these. Let me explain to you why I think it's overrated and why I think it may not be what you need for your own woodworking. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The Domino Joiner. You look at any woodworking channel on YouTube today, especially the big ones, and you're going to see them using domino joinery. Okay, it's like it's become the thing to do. They're going to put a tabletop together, you can use domino joiner. They're going to do a waterfall table or like a river coming over the edge, they're going to use domino joints. I see people doing it for all kinds of stuff. All right, I'm not saying they're necessarily wrong, I'm just saying that they're not necessarily right either. Now here's the problem I have with the big problem I have with domino joinery. Number 1 is it's expensive. That machine is $1,200 to $1,600, depending on which kit you get. There's only one manufacturer you can get it from, and they're, of course, cashing in on their patent, and I don't blame them for that in the least. I just don't really want to shell out that kind of money for a tool that I don't think I need. People did woodworking for thousands of years without domino joinery, and they did a great job. Why all of a sudden is that the thing we have to have in order to do woodworking? Now, some people think you need the domino joinery because of strength, and that's really not the idea, because gluing 2 pieces of wood together is as strong as you need to get. Putting those little wood dominoes in there really doesn't make it any stronger. So if you've heard anyone talk about, well, you've got to have it or you can't make a strong tabletop or a strong joint or whatever, they're wrong. What it's really about is alignment. And I'll have to say, the domino joinery does a great job of giving you good alignment. You try and make that tabletop and you want to make sure they're all level, it's going to make sure that you're joining the pieces together level. Now, of course, some other factors like everything is planed properly and it's all thickness properly. Okay, those are all issues too. But as far as getting them aligned, it'll do that. If you're going to make that waterfall table, and you got to get that 45, that mitered corner just right, I can see where domino joinery is a great way of putting that together. I don't do those, so it's not necessary for me. But I see people using them for all kinds of things where maybe it's not the best joint to use. And it's kind of an expensive way to put things together. Can you build things with it? And will you build good things with it? Well, I certainly hope if you buy one, you build good things with it. And I'm quite sure that it won't be the tool or the technology that's holding you back. But do you need it to build good things? No. As I said, people have been doing things for thousands of years without them. You still can. Well, okay, what do you do if you don't have a domino joiner? Well, ever heard of dowel pins? Doweling is extremely easy and extremely inexpensive. You can buy a doweling jig for like 30 bucks, 20 bucks, and use dowel pins, which are much, much cheaper than dominoes. That's a great way of joining things together. I do a lot of stuff with dowels because I learned dowels and I like working with dowels. I can do anything with dowels that I would do with that domino joiner. So it's like, why do I need to spend the money? Okay, that's my big issue. Again, there's nothing wrong with the tool, there's nothing wrong with the technology, there's nothing wrong with the design. But I do believe it's overrated simply because you don't need it. You can get by just fine without it. Now, while we're on that, let me talk about the predecessor to the domino, and that was the biscuit joiner. There's a number of years there. Oh yeah, you got to have a biscuit joiner. You can't build anything without a biscuit joiner. You can't put a tabletop together without a biscuit joiner. The same sort of attitude I see some people using when it comes to the domino joiner. And of the two, I would have to say the domino is better than the biscuit. And here's the reason why. The domino is a snug joint, all right? The width is a little over wide, so you've got what's called a floating tenon, right? You're making mortises in both parts, and then you're putting a tenon in between, a double-ended tenon. and it's snug as far as the thickness of the material, and it's floating a little as far as the width, which allows you to get your final adjustment just right. Great. Does a good job of that. The biscuit joiner is not a snug fit. The biscuits fit in there, but they're not really snug. So it's not actually as good a joint as the domino is. If you're using it to align things, it will align them, but not as exactly as the domino will. So of the two, the domino is definitely superior to the biscuit, although the biscuit's a whole lot less expensive. But either way, you don't need it. Again, you can do it with dowels. People use dowels for centuries. Okay, so the choice is yours. I'm just telling you, it's overrated and you don't need to spend all that money. Number 2 on my list is the miter saw. I have a miter saw here in my shop. Now, I have owned a miter saw in the past. There was a time when I was doing construction work. I had a small construction company, did a lot of remodel type work, tenant finishes of stores and offices and things like that. And I used that miter saw pretty much every day because the miter saw was developed for finished carpentry. In other words, doing the interior trim, the architectural trim in a building. That's what it was developed for doing. And it does a great job of it. If you need to cut baseboard, door casings, even crown molding, a miter saw is a great tool to use, and I would highly recommend it. But if you're working in your workshop, you can do anything you can do with that miter saw on your table saw. You know, my dad, who was a woodworker all his life, never owned a miter saw, other than a miter box. He did it all on his table saw, and he did it without some of the sleds that we have available to us today. But with the sleds we have, you can get extremely accurate cross cuts, and you can get extremely accurate miter cuts. I've got a radial arm saw here in this shop that I've had here for 40 years. It's a great radial arm saw. I don't do miter cuts on it anymore. I do them all on my table saw because I can get a more accurate miter cut on my table saw with a miter sled than I can get out of that radial arm saw. And I'm sure it's more accurate than anything I'll get out of a miter saw. Okay? So while the miter saw is a great tool, and there are a number of manufacturers that make some really good miter saws out there, I just don't think it's needed. I think the average woodworker can do everything they need to do with their table saw. Again, if you're going to do carpentry work, or even if you're going to do some remodeling work around the home, and you're going to be doing some heavy-duty trim work or architectural trim, yeah, get yourself a miter saw. But if you're just going to do one room, you can do everything you need to do as far as that architectural trim on your table saw. You don't need a miter saw. So, okay, why spend the money? You may as well invest that money in something you can get more use out of it. Now, I will say there's one thing that the miter saw does that is hard to do on the table saw, and that's external corners for crown molding. Okay? Can you do external corners for crown molding on a table saw? Yeah, I've seen it done. My dad did it. I've never tried it myself. I have done them on my radial arm saw. I've done them with a miter saw. I've done them with the Craig's adaptive cutting system, which is their table and track saw combination. But I've never done them on a table saw. It can be done though. I know it can be done. So you can spend as much as about $650 on a miter saw, or you can save that money and use it for something else. To me, the miter saw isn't necessary to be able to do good woodworking. So therefore I say it's overrated. Number 3 on my list is the pocket hole jig. Now, as you can see, I've got 2 pocket hole jigs here on my workbench, so I'm not so against pocket hole jigs that I would never have one or never touch one. I actually have a third one around here somewhere. These 2 are made by Craig, the other one's made by somebody else. And yes, I do use them from time to time, but I don't use them all the time. There are other things that I do and that I prefer using. Pocket holes are useful, but they're not everything. Now, I first started using pocket holes only about 6 months ago, and it was because I was making the sawnary clamp rack that I've got hanging over here on the wall, and the plans called for doing it with pocket holes. Okay, so I got a pocket hole jig, and I started doing pocket hole joinering. It's easy, it works, and it's a strong joint. But that doesn't mean it's the joint for everything, and that doesn't mean that we should be thinking of it as a joint for everything. But you know something? There are woodworkers out there that once they get their hands on pocket hole joinery, they think that's the way to do everything. And I'm specifically referring to new woodworkers that haven't had time to learn other things. So what's happening to some of these new woodworkers is they get their hands on a pocket hole jig, and they start using it for everything. And then they put something on one of the groups, the woodworking groups in Facebook, saying, I'm about to make a table for my kitchen, and I'm going to put together pocket hole joints. How many 100 screws do you think I'm going to need? Well, one, I haven't seen your plan, and two, I don't know why in the world you're using pocket holes to put that together. Just glue it together. Glue and clamps, that's how you put a tabletop together, not pocket holes. Yet there are people that think that that's the way to do it. Why? They got their hands on a pocket hole jig and they think it's great. Now, let me say this. The pocket hole jig was created, I believe, and I may be wrong on this, for doing face frames on cabinets. And you know something? They're great for that. They're absolutely wonderful for that. That's when you need to connect something together and you need the screws hidden, or the screws have the opportunity to be hidden, like it's on the back side of that face frame. Yeah, they're great. You get a good strong joint, it's quick and easy to do, and it's durable. Kind of hard to beat that. You're not going to get that out of brad nails and an air nailer. You're probably not going to get as strong a joint out of dowels, although you could put that together with dowels, and I probably would. Well, not now that I've dowel these, I would probably use these. But that doesn't mean you do everything that way. That's really what they were created for, and they excel at that. They really do. But do you need pocket holes to put a tabletop together? No, you don't. You need glue and clamps. And your glue joint will be as strong as anything you need. Do you need to put cabinets together? Cabinet like car cases? No, you don't. Do you need to put, I had somebody actually say they were going to use it to put a butcher block top together. How in the world do you put a butcher block together with pocket screws? I don't even know. So there are limitations to it. But the biggest limitation, I think, is what it does to the woodworker, because once people start using pocket screws and trying to use it for everything, they stop learning. Now, I've got a book in there in my office that my wife gave me of joinery, wood joinery. It's a good inch thick, color pages, beautiful book, and shows a couple hundred different types of joinery you can do with wood. I don't even know how to do them all. And I've been at this for 50 years. Yet, I'm still learning. See, that's one of the beauties of woodworking, is it's a constant learning process. And as long as we're doing new things and expanding our horizons and trying to do more complicated projects, we're giving ourselves an opportunity to learn. And then we can make better projects. We can do fancier stuff. But when we lock ourselves into one way of doing things, then we limit ourselves and what we can do and how we can make it look. I certainly wouldn't want to put a coffee table for my living room together. We're talking, and my living room's kind of fancy, okay? It's like, you know, old Victorian style stuff. I certainly would want to put that together with pocket holes and have somebody sitting there at a table wondering, what's that spot on that leg? Oh, it's a dowel rod where he hid the pocket hole. Why do you use pocket holes to put that together? You know, that's one of the limitations of pocket holes. You really can't hide it. You're counting on it being someplace where it's hidden, like the inside of those face frames for those cabinets. But if you're trying to attach a cross member to a leg and use a pocket hole to do it from the underside, it's going to be visible. There's no way around it. Yeah, I know, you can plug the hole, and you can stain it, and you can varnish it, and you'll still look like a plugged hole. Better off putting a tenon on the end of that cross member and a mortise into the leg and glue it and clamp it, let the glue dry, and now you've got something that's going to look good, it's going to be solid, that's properly done. So my issue with pocket hole joinery isn't that there's anything wrong with these jigs, and I won't even say you don't need one. What I'm saying is you don't need to overuse it. That's where it becomes overrated, is when people try and do everything with just one tool. Number 4 on my list is actually a category, and I'll call it gimmicky measurement devices. Now, I first said inaccurate measurement devices, and the reason I said that is many of these gimmicky measurement devices are also rather inaccurate. A lot of this stuff comes out of China, and you find it advertised on Facebook as, this is the tool that's going to transform your woodworking, or something to that effect. Yeah, I'll admit it, I've bought a few of them. And I've mostly been disappointed. I recently bought a set of gauge blocks that came from China. And gauge blocks, if you're not familiar with them, they're just wood blocks that are different thicknesses. And they're used for very accurately setting something up, like say, the height of your cut on your table saw or the height of your router bit in the table. It's a standard machinist type of a tool, but the ones that are coming now into the woodworking community aren't the quality level of what machinists use. They're much lower. Instead of being finely milled and ground stainless steel, they're a lesser grade of steel that has been machined and then powder coated. And they look nice and they look like they're really good. And I ordered a set, and they came in here, and I took a set of micrometers, which I know to be accurate within 1/10,000th of an inch. I know that because I've checked them myself. And I checked out those blocks, and I found out that I was 1/8,000th of an inch off in half an inch. Now that may not seem much to you, but to a guy who's got an engineering background and who has come from a place where I'm used to tools like that being extremely precise, like within that 1/10,000th or at least within 1,000th, to find one of them 1/8,000th of an inch off was just horrible. These are supposed to be high precision tools. Well, they went back. But I can't always send back the things that I buy that come from China. So that time they came from China via Amazon, and Amazon has an absolutely wonderful refund policy, and they took good care of me. I have other tools I bought from China. This tri-square, I've had this for a while. This was made in China, and it's very accurate. It's right on. Does a good job for me. Now, I don't use all the functions on it. It's got these little holes in here so that you can draw a line so far from the edge, and I don't think those are accurate enough. But I don't use it that way, so that really is kind of immaterial, okay? If you use it just right, it works out great, but to me, the holes are too big. All right. Here's a digital angle meter, also from China. I use all the time. If you've ever watched me setting up my table saw for angled cuts, you may have seen me use this. I've got two of them, this one and a longer one. Very accurate, great tool. I've got this digital height gauge, and even though it is plastic, this does a great job for me when I'm trying to set up the height of my cut on either my table saw or my router table. Great. China. This thing, yeah, I bought it because it looked cool. Yeah, it looked cool. And I got here and I go, what do you do with that thing? Because I couldn't remember what the ad said. And I don't know. It sits in my toolbox. See, there's a lot of stuff that's being sold, and it looks good, and it's advertised to look good, but that doesn't necessarily mean is good. This is probably the worst purchase, other than maybe those gauge blocks, I ever made. This is a T-square. Now, I like T-squares because I did take drafting way back when in high school. And this is supposed to be a T-square that does two things for you. One, it's notched here so you can do those lines from the edge. And the other is you can set it for different angles because it's a ball detent. Well, okay, if you're satisfied with it being within a degree or two, yeah, it'll do the different angles for you. But it won't stay, if it's tight, it won't turn. And if it'll turn, it's not tight. And if it's not tight, it's not accurate. So literally the only way you could use this and keep it accurate is to reset it and check it every time you use it. And it's also, by the way, very thin steel. Even though it's supposed to be stainless steel, trying to keep it flat is like a joke. As far as I'm concerned, it's a piece of junk. The only reason it didn't go back is I couldn't send it back. So it sits here. I just dug it out from under my toolbox because it had fallen off the side of my toolbox where I had held with magnets. And I dug it out of underneath the toolbox so I could show it to you. It's a piece of junk. When you're buying stuff like this, don't get taken by the advertising, please. Okay? There's a lot of really great measurement devices out there. And I am a firm believer in good quality, accurate measurement devices. Okay? My ruler, just my plain ordinary ruler that I use, 12-inch ruler, is stainless steel. It's thick, heavy duty stainless steel engineering rule. Why? Because I want something that's accurate. I want something that's stiff and strong so it's not going to bend on me. And I want my engraved lines to be so dead on that I can really see clearly that I'm getting the right measurement. I mean, accuracy is key. If you're going to set up a table saw and you're trying to make a 45-degree beveled cut and you don't have something like this to tell you where 45 degree is, don't just count on the gauge, the Like the protractor, it's on the front of your saw. Yeah, it'll get you within a degree, maybe even a half a degree. But if you're trying to make a box, you're trying to miter those corners together on that box, it's not accurate enough. Yes, you need accurate tools. Here's my issue, is not all this stuff is accurate. One thing I found is that the digital stuff, even when it's low cost, tends to be more accurate than the mechanical stuff, okay? Something to keep in mind. But I have a real issue with all of the overrated, hyped up, poor quality measurement tools that are out there for sale that are trying to grab the dollar of the new woodworker, and they're really not worth owning. So be careful when you're looking for that stuff. Make sure you get it, what you get is good, and when you get it, check it out, and if it's not good, please try and send it back. Maybe if enough people send them back, the companies will get the idea that they need to improve their quality and make something that's worth owning. Finally, number 5, and the last item on my list of overrated tools in woodworking, is the lowly carpenter's pencil. Now, the reason I think that this is overrated is because for some reason woodworkers think they need to use a carpenter's pencil, and I got a secret for you. You don't. Not only that, but that carpenter's pencil is not intended to give you the accurate marks that you need for accurate cutting for woodworking. Now think about it. If you're a carpenter and you're cutting 2x4s to make a wall, if you're plus or minus 1/8 of an inch, it's not a big deal. Now if you do a plus or minus 1/8 of an inch in woodworking, you're going to have some huge gaps to fill, or you're going to have some parts that are going to be shoving others out of the way. We deal in measurements like of 1/64 of an inch accuracy. That's barely good enough. Sometimes we work in dimensions that are so tight, it may as well be things that machinists are doing, but we're doing that level work with machinery that is not designed for that level of accuracy. We've got to make up the difference. And we're not going to make it up using that kind of pencil. You know why? Because you can't make a fine enough point on that pencil, especially sharpening it with your pocket knife, that you're going to get a line that is exactly on the side of your T-square, or your tri-square, or your even off your tape measure. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get a 1/16 of an inch wide line, and it's going to be a 1/16 of an inch or so away from whatever you're trying to market, like that square. It's just not going to do it. It's not designed to do it, and expecting it to do it is really unreasonable. Now, theoretically, you can sharpen one of these to the point where you can get that level of accuracy, okay? I've seen one man, one old woodworker that used to sharpen his with a chisel, and he could get a really nice point on there. But even then, there's the tendency, because you're sharpening from both sides, that it's going to be away from the edge of the metal of your ruler or your square. I prefer one of these, a mechanical pencil. That's got a 1/2 millimeter lead in it, and actually make them even finer than that. And that will get right up close. Now, I will say there's still going to be a difference between the line and the edge, okay, because of the thickness here. But now we're talking 1/4 of a millimeter difference, not a 1/16 of an inch. That's a whole lot more accurate. I use mechanical pencils almost exclusively in my workshop, simply because it gives me the level of accuracy that I need. Now, I know there's a lot of woodworkers that complain about losing pencils. I get it. I've been using this pencil for years, and I never lose it. That's what pockets are for. Oh, well, but, okay, so get yourself a dozen of them. Put them in different places in your workshop. Tie them with a string to your tools. There's ways around it. But that's going to give you a lot more accuracy. And if you really want accuracy, what you want is you want a marking knife. Now, the nice thing about the marking knife compared to the pencil is when I make the line with the marking knife right up alongside the edge of my ruler, it's literally going to be where the edge of that ruler is. That's accuracy. If you're trying to cut, say, a miter joint for a frame and you need it right dead on, or maybe for the edging of a table, you've got a tabletop and you're making essentially a frame to make the edging for that tabletop, that's going to get right dead on. That's accuracy. That doesn't do it. That's not what you and I need to be working with. So there you have it. That's my list of the 5 most overrated tools in woodworking. Now, I'm sure you haven't agreed with everything I've said. And maybe you are strongly opposed to some of the things I've said. That's okay. You don't have to agree with me. If you want to make some comments, please do so. We don't have to get nasty about it. We can agree to disagree, or we can disagree in an amicable way. I'd be interested to hear why you would disagree with me. If you think that, say, the domino joiner is a thing you've got to have, I'd like to hear your reasoning for that. But that doesn't mean we need to get nasty with each other. Now, if you have other tools that you think are just about as overrated as these, I'd like to hear that as well, too, because I may have missed something. I put a little thought into this, more than 5 minutes worth. But it'd be interesting to hear what other people, other woodworkers have seen that they say, that's really not necessary, but everybody thinks you got to have it. Because, granted, there's an awful lot of tools available for us to pick from, and it's very easy to get trapped into buying stuff and wonder, why did I spend the money? So if you've got some experiences where you've bought some things and then decided that wasn't the thing you needed, I'd be interested to hear about that too, and why you feel that way about it. Let's share our experiences, and maybe we can all learn a little bit, and maybe in the future we can help others to keep from spending money on stuff they don't really need. So, have a good day, make some sawdust, and put your comments below.